I'm Professor Lori Thompson, and I teach computer science at Vincennes University. If you're watching this video, chances are you are attending one of our summer camps for high school students. If that's the case, welcome, and I hope you have a great experience. I'm going to give you a brief introduction to some basic programming constructs that you'll be using during your project for the camp. We'll be talking about what is programming, what are constructs, and the examples of constructs are sequence, selection, and iteration. And then we'll be talking a little bit about block coding, which is what you will use during the project. So what is computer programming? Well, computers don't know anything. They're a pile of electronics. So computer programming is the process of giving instructions to a computer to perform specific tasks. And it's like teaching the computer to do things for you. Just like you talk to other people using a language like English or Spanish, you're going to communicate with the computer using a programming language. Some examples of commonly used programming languages are Java and Python, but there are many, many others. Programming constructs are building blocks used to design programs. Constructs form the basis for all computer programs. Three basic building blocks or constructs are sequence, selection, and iteration. Sequence is basically the order in which the instructions occur and are processed. In the beginning, when you're learning to program, you usually will just write lines of code all in order, and they execute in sequence. But sometimes when you're programming, you will need to make a decision. That's when selection comes into play. Selection allows you to have your code determine which path a program will take while it's running. And what you use are if-then-else statements or logic to decide what instructions to execute. An example of this would be when calculating payroll. If the employee worked 40 hours, then they get paid the flat rate. If they worked more than 40 hours, they get paid overtime. So you're going to execute different sections of code based on how many hours the employee worked. Iteration is simply allowing sections of code to be repeated during execution. So instead of writing the same code over and over, you can create something called a loop that will allow the same lines of code to repeat until a condition is met. This makes your code much more efficient. So those are the three coding constructs for beginners. And what you'll be using instead of a programming language, you'll be using something called block coding to do your project. Beginning programmers often learn to code by using blocks. Blocks are visual. You can see in the example on the left that it's very visual, and you're basically dragging and dropping these blocks and putting them in the order that you want. Block coding is going to allow you to build programs, again, by dragging and dropping blocks that represent different commands or actions. Block coding is used a lot in education. It allows students to grasp the fundamental programming concepts and the logic and the problem-solving skills in a more intuitive and hands-on manner. Some examples of block coding are Scratch and Blockly, and in your project you will be using Blockly. So that is a brief overview and introduction to programming, programming constructs, and the Blockly language. I hope you have a great time. Thanks for listening.